Hello and welcome to Early Childhood Ireland's podcast. Our podcast series features interviews and discussions on all issues relating to quality early learning and care, with a range of speakers who are leaders in the areas that matter to Early Childhood Ireland members. I'm Maura Corbett and I work with Early Childhood Ireland, and you're welcome to season two. In this fourth episode of our series, reflecting on how we can best support very young children in early learning and care, I'm really delighted to be joined by Sarah O'Leary, who was the recipient of the 2020 Early Childhood Ireland Pedagogical Leader of the Year award. Sarah is deeply committed to creating the best experiences in beautiful environments for children. So, Sarah, you're really welcome. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Maura. I'm thrilled to be here.
Great. Okay, so we're going to kind of pull together the three previous podcasts showing how slow relational pedagogy applies in practice. So thinking back to the first episode of the podcast where Dr. Geraldine French talked about slow relational pedagogy, how does that work in practice for you in cheeky carrots?
When I was listening to Geraldine speak about slow relation pedagogy, it raised a lot of questions for me. And how did we do it? Because without using that language, through reflecting on her piece, I discovered that we've been working towards that for years, and it has taken years to get to this point. And I suppose the last 16 years has been an incredible journey where we've explored different philosophies and we've implemented different approaches from high scope to Marty Mayo to Ashter and Shielta, and of course Reggio Emilia at the moment. So what I was thinking is that I try and talk to our experience and what we found works for us. It may not be the same for everybody else,
Yeah.
but just like Reggio, we're making it relevant to our environment.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, that's the thinking behind Reggio is you can't do Reggio anywhere else other than Reggio. You can be inspired by it in your own context.
Yeah, and it's the same with slowing down because we all have different focuses and different priorities. So for us, to start with, we've done a lot of reflection on what our image of the child is and what our goal is, what we want to try and provide for children. So one of the bits that we've kind of become very clear on is that we want to support children's emotional development, and we do this through positive social experiences by providing play and art opportunities. And part of that is holding the image of the child central, that they are creative, that they're curious, and that they're capable. And if we believe that of the children, our educators have to be creative and believe in themselves and trust in their own abilities. So one of the big things, once we had that clear, I suppose we then began to realize that maybe the high scope curriculum and routine that we had been following just had too many transitions that we were finding unmanageable. So we started paring it right back to see what transitions could we not do without, which were meal times, caring, nappy caring, toileting, and rest times. So once we worked around that, we realized that the rhythm of the day can flow much more naturally when we put these things, when we make them important and give them their own value. And by slowing everything down, those moments have become equally as important to us as the play and exploration times that happen between them. So it's a bit like what Marty Mayo says, you're making every possible interaction valuable and meaningful for the children.
Yeah, and that bit of seeing those care routines as, Jim Green mentions them as prime times, and I think Geraldine French referred to somebody calling them sacred times, seeing them as a value rather than a break between other things that has to be got through as quickly as possible. And
Yeah,
when you
and
put
I
the
mean,
value on it,
we have to do them. So
yeah,
we might as well make them meaningful.
absolutely.
instead of doing, I think, I don't know who in the previous speakers was talking about trying to avoid that conveyor belt approach for things.
Yes, yes.
Make it a sociable, meaningful connection time between the educators and their children, and the children as a group together, so that it's social. So between those transitions, then we discovered that we had at least an hour and a half of uninterrupted time where the children, we now have made sure that we can provide opportunities for at least an hour and a half where the children play and explore and work and communicate and build on their relationships without having to move on to the next piece. They work at their own pace.
And within that time, babies and toddlers who need a sleep or need a change, that happens for them rather than everybody sleeping at the same time or having nappy changes at the same time.
Yeah, and we're following everyone's needs, and I'm going to talk about that later, about how we've also discovered by doing reflection and learning stories that we are truly following the children and getting to know them on a much deeper level than we would have. And I think one of the beautiful things that I, as a part of the leadership team, have discovered is that what I love is when I go into a room, and I know it might seem counterintuitive, but when the educators look like they're doing nothing, when they're sitting on the floor brushing the doll's hair, they're not rushing around trying to preempt what's coming next. I know everything needs to get cleaned. I know there are times, but by having a team of educators who trust each other and support each other, they know who's going to do what at different times, ensuring that there's always educators available to be present with the children in their care,
And that being present, that, sitting on the floor, brushing the doll's hair, that's such a lovely example of what's really important. Slowing it down to be able to savor and value those moments, because they're the moments that matter to the children. And, talking about the idea of relationships, and, Lillian's episode was about the environment and how the environment plays a role. You've mentioned you're influenced by Reggio Emilia and the idea of the environment being the third teacher. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, and the ever thorny question of who are the other two teachers? It's sometimes a debated topic to know who the other two teachers are. So can you take us through your environments, please, Sarah?
Well, myself and Michelle were really lucky that in 2008 we got to go to Reggio Emilia with yourself, Maura.
Yeah.
And it was really, really profound for what we realized was possible for children. But of course, it was really intimidating at the time, because we were seeing things that were not the ordinary in Ireland, and we were coming back saying, oh, we could never do that here. Now, we did bring things back, and we brought things back for the environment, like having platforms, having natural and found materials. We got a carpenter to make light tables for us, all these things. But again, it took us 4 or 5 years before we fully understood how to use these things and how valuable they could be for the children in their environment. So for us, I suppose our environments they're painted in whites and creams. They're really calming. They're aesthetically beautiful. We have beautiful rugs on the floor. We have cushions. When we're designing a room layout, we look at it from the ground up, because for our very young children, that's where they spend their time. It's not at adult height. So it needs to look and feel comfortable for the child. And one of the major questions that we ask is, how does this feel for the child? What curiosities does this support for the child? How are we following their emergent interest? So my expectation when I go into a room is that I can visibly see the personalities of the individuals and the groups that are within the room, as well as their educators, because all of us are bringing our own experience, the children as well as the adults. So that, I suppose, the other two teachers then within Reggio are the child and the adult. And I suppose the primary teacher in a child's life is their parent. And it's really, really important that we as educators collaborate and share information with the parents, and that they equally in turn share their knowledge with us about their children, because they are the experts about their children.
Absolutely.
So it's trying to find that balance. And then of course our educators are bringing their years of experience, like our team of educators that work with the under twos have actually been with us. One of them has been with us since 2008. The others are with us for 6 and 7 years as well.
Fantastic.
They're bringing their own knowledge and expertise, and they also have a major understanding of why it is we do the things we do.
And they're bringing their own interests as well. I mean, I think that's, that's as much as we want to tap into children's forms of knowledge and children's own interests. The educators bringing their own expertise, certainly, and their own interests. So, if you're interested in drama and creativity, having the freedom to bring that into your pedagogy is so important, isn't it?
Yeah, one of our educators is heavily involved in underage soccer. So we have a little boy who is obsessed with soccer. And because of that, they have now found a shared interest that they're both genuinely interested in. And they have conversations about Liverpool all day long. And that's the educator being true to herself as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Which makes for more authentic interactions and relationships.
And everything's about relationships. And the children are no better teacher. There's no better teachers for us than the children in showing us how to develop those relationships.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then you've mentioned about using learning stories and recognizing the parents as the primary educators of their children and communicating that back. In the kind of 5-6 minutes that we've left, can you talk about how you use learning stories, how you develop them, how you communicate them?
Okay, so learning stories for us before were always this big, huge piece of work that would have had 3 or 4 educators involved in documenting and photographing and all that. But through ongoing professional development at a workshop, there was the realization that we could actually use learning stories as really meaningful documents that are now proving themselves to be living and breathing resources within the room. So our educators, just like they would have done before, record the anecdotes, record the observations that they've seen about the children. They within that story, then they talk to why these moments were meaningful for them as the educator and why they thought they were worthy of writing about, because they were meaningful for the children. And then for us, the most important part about these learning stories, while they're wonderful to show how much the educator knows the children and values what they're doing, the educator also reflects on what these moments mean. What do they potentially mean for the child? What do they mean for us as educators? Is it that they taught us something? Is it that we're going to start researching a certain project? How are we going to support the child in these observations? So we take observations every month, and then they're compiled into a booklet and they're given to the families as Christmas presents. And the feedback from the families has been amazing, because of the work that the educators have put into it. And that's achievable by providing the educators with teacher research time. So they get time away to reflect individually and ideally as part, in collaboration with somebody else, either from the leadership team or somebody from another group, another educator. So they're real meaningful documents. So.
And on an ongoing basis, I mean, you that idea of sharing them with the parents as Christmas presents is just beautiful and so meaningful. But on an ongoing basis, I suppose, especially in COVID times, how do you communicate those to parents? Do you use email or something like that?
We use email, and we have an app that we communicate with the parents, and it gets shared on that.
Okay. So parents are constantly up to date with the interests that their children are
The beauty
exploring.
of compiling them is you can see the progression. You can see how one experience is building on the next, is building on the next. So I think it gives it even more value having them done like that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
For the immediate, yes.
Yeah. Seeing the progression is so important. So, Sarah, thanks a million for sharing. I think this pulling together of the previous 3 episodes where we talked about the concept of slow relational pedagogy, the importance of the environments and the importance of the interactions, and showing how that is made real in a real setting every day, will kind of pull it all together and show how slow relational pedagogy applies in practice. So thank you so much for sharing those ideas. You've given us so much food for thought about how those ideas of slow relational pedagogy can influence everyday practice to make children's experiences loving, caring, and relational. And thanks to you for listening to Early Childhood Ireland's podcast. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please tell your friends and colleagues, and we hope you'll join us the next time. And in the meantime, check out our website and our usual social media channels. Thank you.